setting the mood for Halloween. Today, we are counting down 7 intriguing haunted places. Number 1, the Moon River Brewery in Savannah, Georgia. It started out as the Savannah City Hotel in 1821 and ended when General Sherman claimed the city with his march to the sea during the American Civil War. It was also served as a hospital during the yellow fever outbreaks, and then as storage, and then for about 20 years it sat vacant. And then in 1995 it became the Moon River Brewery. The ghost sightings at the Moon River Brewery have been many. One of them being in the basement. The staff decided to name him Toby. He can be seen moving around the basement silently. There's also been sightings of children in the upper levels where the hospital was. And while it was a hotel, the famous shooting of James Stark took place. It is debated on where the shooting actually happened, whether it be the kitchen or the staircase, but nevertheless, he can be seen wandering around the main floor. Reports of people feeling cold as ice and beer bottles moving through the air. People being trapped in bathroom stalls, chased by unseen forces, and pushed downstairs. Number 2, the Sultan's Palace. Built in 1836 and owned by a very wealthy plantation owner that stumbled across hard times and had to rent it out to Prince Suleiman from Turkey, the young prince referred to himself as a sultan, even though he wasn't the sultan, his brother actually was, but when he came to the States, he brought with him a harem of women and young boys. When they moved in, they covered all the windows with thick curtains and put padlocks on all the doors. There were plenty of rumors around the time of people going missing and being kidnapped. But the real horrors happened the night that the neighbors saw blood on the door, called the cops. When the cops showed up, the scene that they walked into was straight out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere. Bits and pieces of body parts, decapitated heads, arms, legs, littered the entire palace. When they got to the backyard, they found the Sultan's hand sticking out of a shallow grave. He'd been buried alive. Still to this day, they don't know who did it. But a lot of theories have been around. One being the most popular. He'd stole a bunch of treasure from his brother, the real Sultan, and he had him executed, as well as the harem he brought with him. The house has since been broken up into apartments. Those residents have reported seeing the Sultan's ghost and figures dressed in oriental attire. The sounds of shrieking and screaming can be heard, as well as the thuds of body parts hitting the floor. Number 3, the Eastern State Penitentiary. It was built in 1829 to hold 253 inmates to solitary confinement. At one point in its history, it housed over 1,700 prisoners. The conditions were appalling, to say the least. It also once was called home to Al Capone for about 8 months when he got busted for concealed carry of a deadly weapon. During Herbert Smith's reign at the prison, he tortured inmates using a variety of different ways. One of those ways being a water bath, where they would give the inmates an ice bath and then hang them on the wall, only done in the winter. Another way was called the mad chair, where they would tie you tightly to a chair for days, weeks on end. Another, the iron gag, where they would put a collar around the tongue of an inmate and tie it to their wrists and put them behind their back. Survival was unlikely with all the loss of blood. Legend has it that a locksmith was repairing a 140-year-old lock when an overwhelming force came over him, holding him down. Some say that as he removed the key from the lock, it opened a gateway to its horrific past, allowing the evil to leak into our world. The prison closed in 1971, and if you're feeling brave, they still give tours. Number 4, the LaLaurie Mansion. The mansion was built back in 1831 The mansion was built for Louis LaLaurie and his wife, Delphine, aka Madame LaLaurie. The story might sound familiar if you watch American Horror Story, because they kind of borrowed bits and pieces of it. But as the rumors have it, Madame LaLaurie was an evil person. As the story goes, a young slave girl chose to jump to her death instead of facing the punishment from Madame LaLaurie. Delphine also kept her cook chained to the kitchen stove. On April 10th, 1834, a fire happened that changed everything. When the fire marshals got there, they found the cook chained to the stove, still alive. She admitted that she started the fire as a suicide attempt to avoid the punishment of Madame LaLaurie. It was that fire that led to the discovery of the horrors that went on upstairs. They found 7 mutilated slaves. As far as what really happened to those slaves, I found varying stories. Some say that they were hung by their necks and stretched. Some say the slaves were missing limbs, and some of their limbs had been purposefully deformed. Whatever the truth may be, people that go into that house say that they can see the slaves, and the walkers-by say they can see Madame LaLaurie upon her balcony. Number 5. The Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. This is one of the most attacked places in all of history throughout the world, and the most sieged place in Great Britain. In its roughly 1100 years of standing there, it's believed that it's been sieged 26 times. The truth is, I find this place ridiculously fascinating and could probably do a whole episode just on it. So if you'd like to see that, go ahead and comment that down below. Now let's stick to the scary facts, shall we? Like many of the places on my list, you can take haunted tours of it too. On their website, they promise stories of murderers, cannibals, body snatchers, bang mobs, and restless spirits. There is a story of the young piper, who they used to try to trace the tunnels that lie beneath it. As he walked through the tunnels, he played his music until it stopped. He's never been seen from again. But still to this day, people can hear the piper playing. There's also been sightings of prisoners from multiple wars and rebellions, figures in the mist, and mist-made figures. People have also reported drops in temperature and tugs on their clothes. Let us not forget the little terrier that spent 14 years guarding his owner's grave that died back in 1872. People say that they can still hear his barking. Some even say they've seen him. Back in the 17th century, King James VI drug 300 to 500 women through the streets of the market and burned them alive because they were witches. Witches. The last story I have to tell you about is Abandoned Annie. She's a little ghost girl that will reach out and grab your hand. People have built a shrine to her, leaving dolls and toys and money. Just to let you know, they actually take that money once a year and donate it to sick children. It's pretty neat. Number 6. The Bates Motel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It was originally built as officers' barracks for World War II, but then it was sold and converted into a motel, and it was sold again to Mr. Bates, Mr. Randy Bates, and renamed to the Bates Motel. This happened way before the book Psycho and the movie renditions. Some people say that the author Robert Bloch stayed at the Bates Motel, but there's no actual evidence of that. Back in 1987, they did a made-for-TV movie, which is where they got their nifty sign. The hauntings that happen there center around rooms 1 and 3. Guests say they feel as if they're being watched. Lights turn on and off by themselves, and ashtrays move completely across the room. If you'd like to take a chance to feel the eerie feelings, go ahead, book a room. Number 7. The Tower of London. Construction started back in 1078, ordered by William the Conqueror. This, for those of you who don't know, is a place where the famous beheadings happened, like Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Jane Grey. And maybe the one most commonly seen walking headless through the halls. And Jane may be the lady in white. But that could be due to the oil painting of her in white done in 1833, so... And then there was King Edward IV's sons. After his death, they were sent to the Tower, awaiting their oldest brother's coronation, King Edward V. But King Richard III seized the crown, and the boys went missing. In 1674, 2 skeletons were found in the White Tower. There, 2 ghosts can be seen, holding each other in fear. If you approach to comfort them, they'll vanish into the walls. There was even a sighting about a bear back in 1815, where this guy saw this bear ghost coming out of the jewel room, so there's that too. And that completes our list, but I have a bonus. So, back when I was a kid, in high school or so, I lived in a haunted house. I lived up in northern Idaho with my mom, dad, and brother, and people would come over and tell us things that they had seen. One of the stories is of a woman that had fallen down the stairs. I had a friend that saw her standing at the top of the staircase there and saw her come down, and as she hit the ground, she looked up at her, and my friend was in complete shock and fear at seeing this. We also heard stories from friends and family that would come to visit of feeling like they were being pushed down the stairs, both upstairs and downstairs, because it was a 3-story place. One of our friends also told us a story about she was in her living room and she saw this whole funeral happen with people dressed in black and grieving. And my dad used to talk about how you would see this woman dressed in this mid-century kind of garb, and she would just stand over his bed. I used to live upstairs, and so my room, well, I lived in several different rooms, but at the time I lived in what was called the red room because I painted the walls red. And next door to me, because upstairs was just 3 bedrooms, next door to me was called the pink room because the walls were painted pink and my mom had put dolls and stuff in there. But I used to be able to hear saxophone music coming from that room, and I thought it was just me because I do play saxophone. But come to find out, our neighbor guy, who was this old guy that had, grown up in the area, and he knew all of the history about this house because it was one of the oldest houses in the area. It was actually, the town I grew up in was a logging community, and the house that we had lived in was the dairy for the whole town. So it had a lot of history. The house was built in 1910, 1920-ish. So there's quite a bit of history. When you're talking England and Scotland over there, they have so much more history than we do. But over here, 1910, that's an old house. So the old guy would come over and he would tell us the stories of the house, and come to find out there was an amputee. He was a war veteran that had lost his leg, and so he would sit up there with the windows open and play the saxophone, and the whole valley could hear him playing the saxophone. So it was one of those things where I heard the saxophone before he told us the story, so it could just be, I don't know. Anyway, let me know down in the comments if you guys have had your own haunting experiences. If you guys want to hear more fun stories of the haunted house I grew up in, go ahead and leave comments down below, and I may put together a whole video of compiled stories in the history of the house, because I know it all. If you just like this video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to see more content, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to see more of my dog, follow us on Instagram at This Is Having a Bad Day. Thanks for watching. And turn on the notifications. Haunted places. Make you look at the camera. From Turkey. Prince Suleiman. He's a creep. And then hang them up on the wall for decoration for Christmas, because it'd be in the wintertime. when an overwhelming force